In 480 BC, a lone Persian scout peered down from a ridge overlooking the narrow pass of Thermopylae. What he saw was baffling. Below, a small band of Greek soldiers, the Spartans, were not preparing for war in any way he recognized. Some were exercising, others were calmly combing their long, flowing hair. It looked more like a bizarre ritual than the actions of men facing an army of millions. The scout hurried back to the Persian king, Xerxes the Great, to report this strange sight. Xerxes, ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen, simply laughed. He couldn't comprehend it. Why were these men so calm, so seemingly indifferent to the overwhelming force assembled against them? He gave them 4 days, assuming they would see the hopelessness of their situation and simply retreat. They did not. On the 5th day, Xerxes, his patience worn thin, ordered the attack. He was about to learn that the Spartans were not preparing for a battle. They were preparing for a beautiful death. The story of the 300 Spartans at the Hot Gates is one of history's most epic tales of courage. But to truly understand it, we need to go back a little further. When the Persian threat loomed, Sparta was in the midst of a sacred religious festival, the Carneia. During this time, all warfare was strictly forbidden. The city's council of elders, the Gerousia, refused to sanction a full-scale deployment of the Spartan army. They argued that honoring the gods was paramount, even in the face of invasion. But one of Sparta's 2 kings, Leonidas, saw the danger clearly. He knew that if the Persian army marched through the pass of Thermopylae unopposed, all of Greece would be lost. So, he devised a plan. He would take his personal royal bodyguard of 300 men, a force that did not require the approval of the Gerousia, and march north to hold the pass. There was a grim condition for joining this elite force. Leonidas chose only men who already had sons, so that if they fell in battle, their family line would not be extinguished. Each of the 300 knew this was a suicide mission. They were marching to their deaths to buy the rest of Greece precious time. As they prepared to leave, Leonidas's wife, Gorgo, asked him what she should do. His reply was simple and stark: marry a good man and have good children. These men weren't just soldiers, they were fathers and husbands making the ultimate sacrifice. As Leonidas and his 300 Spartans marched north, Thermopylae was a stroke of strategic genius. The pass was so narrow that at some points, only a single wagon could pass through. To one side were sheer, impassable cliffs. To the other, the sea. It was the perfect choke point. Here, the Persians' overwhelming numbers meant nothing. They could only attack the Greeks in a narrow front, a few hundred at a time. The vast Persian army would have to funnel itself into a meat grinder, negating its greatest advantage. Leonidas had chosen his ground perfectly. He and his men built a small stone wall, the Phocian Wall, to further fortify their position. Here, in this tiny sliver of land, 7,000 Greeks would stand against an empire. Here, they would make their stand. On the 5th day, Xerxes unleashed his first wave. He sent in the Medes and Scythians, soldiers from conquered lands, ordering them to take the Greeks alive and bring them before him. He watched from a throne set up on a nearby hill, expecting a quick and easy victory. What he saw was a massacre. The Greeks, heavily armored and fighting in a tight formation called the phalanx, were an immovable wall of bronze and iron. The phalanx was a terrifying human fortress. The front ranks presented a hedge of long spears, each man protected by his own large bronze shield and the shield of the man next to him. They were a single, unified killing machine. The lightly armored Persians crashed against this wall of shields and spears and were utterly destroyed. They were fighting as individuals. The Spartans were fighting as one. Their swords were too short to reach past the Greek spears. Their wicker shields offered no protection against the thrusts of the Spartan dory. The battle was so one-sided that the bodies of the dead began to pile up, creating a gruesome rampart for the Greeks. Wave after wave of Persian troops were sent in, and wave after wave were cut down. The disciplined, mechanical efficiency of the Spartan phalanx was horrifying to witness. Herodotus tells us that Xerxes leaped from his throne 3 times in terror, fearing for his army. The first day of battle ended in a humiliating defeat for the mighty Persian Empire. Frustrated and enraged, Xerxes decided to send in his elite. He unleashed his personal bodyguard, the legendary 10,000 immortals. These were the best soldiers in the Persian army, famed for their skill and bravery. Their name came from the fact that their number was always kept at exactly 10,000. Any man killed or wounded was immediately replaced, giving the illusion of immortality. They were better armed and armored than the regular troops, and they advanced with confidence, expecting to sweep the exhausted Greeks aside. But at the Hot Gates, their reputation meant nothing. They faced the same brutal reality as the Medes before them. The narrow pass rendered their numbers useless, and their skill was no match for the disciplined fury of the Spartan phalanx. They crashed against the wall of shields and were impaled on the forest of spears. The Spartans, masters of close-quarters combat, held their ground with grim determination. The immortals, the pride of the Persian army, were being slaughtered. It was then that Leonidas deployed a brilliant and audacious tactic. He ordered his men to feign a retreat. The Spartans would suddenly break formation and pretend to run, a move that would have been unthinkable for any other Greek army, as it was a sign of cowardice. But this was a disciplined, calculated maneuver. The Persians, sensing victory, would break their own ranks and charge forward in a chaotic, disorganized mob. And then, at a signal, the Spartans would turn as one, reform their phalanx in an instant, and crash back into the pursuing enemy. The result was devastating. The surprised and scattered immortals were trapped and cut down. The feigned retreat worked not once, but several times, each time inflicting terrible casualties. By the end of the second day, even the legendary immortals had been broken against the Spartan shield wall. Xerxes was now desperate. 2 days of fighting, and his most elite troops had failed to dislodge a few thousand Greeks from a narrow pass. His invasion was stalled, his reputation on the line. It seemed the hot gates were impenetrable. But then, a traitor emerged, a local man named Ephialtes, who would offer Xerxes a path to victory, sealing the fate of Leonidas and his 300 brave Spartans. But that is a story for another time. The stand at Thermopylae was over, but the legend was just beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter of history. See you next time.